most startups fail? What common mistakes do you see founders make when starting a company?
A lot of people are blindly attached to an outcome, that you're not listening to advice that the market is giving you. You're not listening to advice that your co-founder is giving you. You're not listening to anyone. And so you can be blinded and not realize it's your ego. You're often out on a ledge doing something that no one has ever done before.
Cyan Banister
is an angel investor and entrepreneur.
Early investing in Uber, SpaceX, and DeepMind.
Do you have any advice on how they can have that mindset shift?
If you think that you can't succeed, well, you won't. If you think that the world is difficult, it will be. My advice is basically...
Welcome back to Decoded. My name's Alfie Whattam, and this is the show where I speak to experts about what it takes to build great teams and companies. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button for more great content like this, and I hope you enjoyed the episode. So, Cyan, you went from being homeless at age 15 to now one of the most successful investors in the world. What advice would you give to young people who are in a difficult situation like you were?
Well, I believe that all hardship in life is a lesson. And so I would reframe how you view your situation and try to find the beauty in it and look around you. And if you have the right attitude and the right open mind, you'll find that beauty. And every day is a new opportunity to get up in the morning and to be a different person and to try something again. And that was my attitude when I was 15, which was every single day that the sun rose, I got a chance to get up and be someone else and hold a dream for a future that I was marching towards. And so my advice to you is to appreciate the hardship, to have gratitude for it, and to understand that it is part of life and part of the learning process. And you'll look back at it someday, and it will define you. Like, one of the things I ask entrepreneurs when they're pitching me is their inception story. I want to know how they got to me. And usually what I'm looking for is that struggle. And so it is an important part of the founder's journey. It's an important part of every human's journey on this planet is to struggle. And some people struggle more than others. We shouldn't invent struggle where there is none, but we do because human beings are good at that.
Yeah.
But in general, just remember it's kind of like going to the gym. The gym hurts at first, and then eventually it doesn't.
Yeah.
And so that's my advice.
How can one remain positive, though, when things around them are so difficult? Because that's a mindset that you had. And I've heard that you would even look forward to just having like bagels with cream cheese during those times, right?
Yes.
Most people don't have that perspective. And I don't know how they could get it, perhaps, unless it's a difficult one. Do you have any advice on how they can have that mindset shift if they're not thinking that way currently?
Yeah, I mean, I had it naturally. I think that I tend to be an optimist, and I always have been one. And I've always tried to find, like, whenever I'm in a bad situation, it doesn't matter what it is. The first question I ask myself is, what do I have? You know, I have sunlight. I have a full belly. If you have a roof over your head, I have a roof over my head. You start with the basics. And you start with gratitude for what you have. And if you really think about it, you'll discover you have a lot more than you even are willing to admit. And from there, you can start from a place of gratitude. I think that I would suggest that people read philosophy, that they start realizing that whatever framework your mind is in and you project outwards is reality. And so if you think that you can't succeed, well, you won't. If you think that the world is difficult, it will be. If you think that, you know, all of these negative reinforcing behaviors become your reality. And so my advice is basically every day you have a new opportunity to change your software. People think that they're not changeable, but they absolutely are. It just takes work. It's like exercise. It just takes work every day. You know, develop a practice of mindfulness, meditation, get to know who the self is and like who you really, really, truly are. And that will help tremendously because every person has the opportunity to reframe a negative thought into a positive one. It's a choice. If you think about it, reality is defined by our perception. There's a big difference between an apple falling and you observe it, and you can say, well, that was gravity, and a feeling that someone has wronged you, which is entirely your perception and your framework, instead of looking at it like, what lesson am I learning from being wronged? What gift is in this? What can I take away from this? How can I adapt to this? What does this teach me about myself? And I think if people did that more, they would realize they're not a victim, they're a victor.
Yeah.
And then they can carry that mindset forward, which is every day I'm going to be a student of life. And eventually you'll become the teacher.
One of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and it talks about this
It's the
point.
best.
It's so good. You've mentioned about reading philosophy then. Aside from that book, are there any others that you would, I'm putting you on the spot here, but are there any in particular that you'd recommend?
I mean, philosophers who are professional philosophers would not consider this person a philosopher, and they consider them more spiritual. But I put them in the philosophy category as Gurdjieff. I stumbled upon Gurdjieff while searching for my own meaning in life. And he had an understudy named Ouspensky who wrote a book called, I think it's called The Curious Case of Ivan Ossikin or something like that. And from what I read, Groundhog Day is based off of that book, which is Nietzsche's eternal recurrence, which is every day we relive the same day over and over again. And we can only break free when we become better human beings. But Gurdjieff, the reason why I like him is he really simply distills how human minds work and how we have these feeling centers, these logic centers, and emotional, we have these centers and we don't combine them all into one. And then we have all of these various I's within us that compete with one another. And so we identify with them. For example, if I were to tell you I am hungry, that is one I. Or if I say I am sad today, well, that is another I. Or if I promise you that tomorrow we're going to go for a walk, but tomorrow comes and I'm not in the mood because the different I woke up the next day. And so a lot of people don't think about their internal dialogue and kind of who, if you were a horse carriage, like who's driving the horse, who's the narrator of your life? Is it you, or are you on autopilot? And so a lot of what I read is about reframing your thinking around your locus of control and who is in charge of your thoughts on a day-to-day basis. I am not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I try to be as aware of my surroundings at any given time as I possibly can be. And so, I would start, if you want to start with philosophy, start with the earliest people, start with Plato, go all the way back. And there's these really great books that have snippets of philosophers that are like 2 or 3 pages of their core philosophy, and then find what really resonates with you. Like, I think philosophy is far more powerful than most therapy sessions. Because it really, really has you fundamentally think about the world in a different way, and it can change you and make you a better person.
I studied philosophy at college, and I learned more from these books and these lessons than anything else, probably. So
and it's really interesting that people discredit it or brush it aside or don't think it's important, but I actually think it's probably one of the most important things we could teach kids is philosophy. And statistics.
Yes. This is a quick message to tell you about my company, Alpha AI. We built Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter who screens candidates for you on autopilot. You can make your recruitment process 10 times faster, 90% lower cost, and significantly improve the candidate experience, all with our AI agent for hiring. Learn more at welovealpha.com or click the link below in the description. And now, back to the episode. On statistics, most startups fail. Now, you previously co-founded Zivity, so you really understand the challenges involved in building something. What common mistakes do you see founders make when starting a company?
Hubris. I think a lot of people are blindly attached to an outcome and they can't see the leaves when they're so blindly attached to the outcome. And so you may think that your assumption about what you're building is right, and it's so right that you're not listening to advice that the market is giving you. You're not listening to advice that your co-founder is giving you. You're not listening to anyone. And so you can be blinded by this vision and not realize it's your ego.
Mm.
And so going back to philosophy, like understanding what the ego is and what it's capable of doing and how it can self-sabotage you. A great example is maybe you worked at a startup and it worked really, really well and you love the leadership of the startup. And so you go start your own company, and I call it making doll houses out of mansions. So you copy the playbook from your previous startup because it worked there. And you're like, well, if it worked there, it's going to work here. And it doesn't. And then you're shocked. You're like, why is the culture from this one place not working in my startup? And it's because they're not apples to apples. Like every single startup is unique. Every product is unique. Every go forward motion is unique. And so that's one of the wonderful things and the terrifying things of being an entrepreneur is that you're often out on a ledge doing something that no one has ever done before. And so it requires first principles thinking. You have to every day wake up and challenge your own assumptions and steelman yourself. And I think a lot of people don't do that. And so they get really stuck in this narrative, this self-fulfilling prophecy, and they're not open enough to change or pivot when they need to. So that often leads to failure. And so I would say your ego is the most important thing to master and to understand in order to be a successful entrepreneur.
Yeah. I mean, master
Which probably
the ego.
flies against what people see because they probably see a lot of very egotistical entrepreneurs out there.
Yeah.
And they want to model that. But often, sometimes people are projecting their own insecurities. And some people, you don't know what's underneath the veil, what's really going on behind the scenes.
It's interesting because some of the most successful founders of all time, at least in the media, you would think that they completely go against what you just said. If you look at an Elon or a Steve Jobs type figure, and oftentimes they do have a reality distortion field and a very concrete vision. But in reality, these people iterate and change more than most people would even begin to imagine, and they're constantly tweaking things.
For sure. If Elon will respond to logic any day of the week. And so if you came to him with something that was completely logical, he'll identify it and completely change course if it made sense. And so the other thing is being able to listen to and attune yourself to logic when it's coming at you and realizing it could be counter to everything you believe. And, and understand that that's the right path. And sometimes it takes listening to an inner voice. And I would say that some of these people, especially Steve Jobs, had a very, very strong intuition.
Yeah.
Like he was very good at editing and very, very good at when someone would bring him an idea, understanding if it was the good one.
And he was famous for saying no to 1,000 things before he said yes to something. So
Exactly. Yeah. So that takes someone who really, truly understands their inner world.
You mentioned Elon then, and you were a very early investor in SpaceX, as well as other amazing companies, Uber, DeepMind, and so on. What's your number one piece of advice for founders on trying to secure funding? You've been on both sides of the table, but for people like myself that are an entrepreneur running a VC-backed company, and we always need more cash, right? When you're trying to build something that's very R&D intensive, especially in my world of AI. What advice would you give to me and other people that need venture capital?
Well, VCs really love conviction.
Yeah.
They really love that this is your life's mission and you wake up every day thinking about it and it's core to who you are. I was just reading Letters to a Young Poet. And I don't know if you've ever read that. But it's a series of letters that a poet sent to another poet in the early 1900s. I think it was like 1904. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave was, and I don't necessarily agree with it, but it's a good piece of advice, which is if you were to take poetry away and put you in a prison and deny you a pen, if you felt that your mere existence could not exist if you weren't doing the thing, wasn't affected by it, then you're not a poet. So basically, if you were locked away in a prison and denied the possibility of being an entrepreneur, could you live? And the answer should be a yearning inside of you that's like, no, I would feel terrible that I couldn't execute this mission. This is my mission in life. And if you have that level of conviction, the money will follow, because that's what they're looking for. They're looking for this determined person that against all odds, you're going to somehow reshape humanity, that you have this vision of how the world should be. I just sent a post on X about how entrepreneurship is a conversation between longing and the future. And so we're looking for that. We're looking for this quality in a person that they're going to fight till their last breath, if they have to succeed at their mission, because they feel it's existential to humanity. And if you're not working on a problem like that, then you might want to question yourself and wonder, am I serving a higher purpose? Am I serving my true calling in life? And if you are, the money will just follow. So have faith in that. Have faith that someone somewhere is going to believe you if it's the right time in the right place in the right moment. And so really have conviction in your mission and have conviction in yourself more than anything.
For people listening that might not feel like they meet that definition, do you think that can be taught and learned, or do you think you have to be born with a certain element of that yearning for what you want?
I think it can be taught. I think anyone can be taught anything. I do think, though, that you have to be honest. For example, when I was at Founders Fund, Peter told me one day that I was very good at feeling and not good at knowing. Very simple advice, but it put me on a tailspin where I started wondering what it would take to know something. And I realized that I don't want to be in data rooms studying spreadsheets. I don't want to know, all of these minute details of a company. I actually care more about the idea phase and the very early stages of a seed company. And it really, really made me focus on what and who I truly am. So be honest with yourself, and honesty can be learned. And if you're very honest and you're like, wow, I'm really just doing this because I want to make a lot of money, or I'm really doing this because I want the social approval of my peers, or I'm going to make my parents happy, or any of those reasons are not great reasons. And just be honest with yourself and go do some soul searching, and you'll find the thing that your life is calling you to do. And if it's not what you're doing, then trust me, everyone around you, everybody you recruit into your company is going to feel it. So you've got to be authentic about it.
Yeah. Your approach to life, business, investing is very different to most people's, and I mean that in a very, very good way. Tell me about the ugly duckling theory.
Yes. So my mother, when I was little, called me an ugly duckling. And I grew up on the Navajo reservation in Arizona, and I was one of only less than 10 children who looked like myself. And so looked like myself, meaning my skin color was different, and I didn't fit in. And because I was an outsider, I was a foreigner. And so I developed perceptions about my beauty, about my self-worth, based off of these circumstances. And so my mother said, well, you are just an ugly duckling, but someday you'll be a swan. And someday you're going to find your people. And, on the surface, you could look at that and say, what a cruel thing to tell a child. Like, you're just an ugly duck. You're just not with the right birds. But one of the things I realized was that I have become a swan and I have found my people and I have found my calling in life, and she was right. And so, again, looking at hardship and looking at something that someone said that hurt at the time, because as a child, it really hurt. I thought my mother was calling me ugly. Um, and she did call me ugly in other ways, but regardless, I internalized that as I'm an ugly person and I, will someday be beautiful. And so that is the theory. I'm one of the things about my blog that I'm doing is writing out loud and trying to remember my past from the perspective of the child that was.
Mm.
And I'm using it as source material for my memoir and my book that I'm writing. But what's really interesting is every time I tell one of these stories, I get hundreds of messages from people relating to them and how it relates to their own stories or their own revelations of their past and how they might reframe it and how they might think about it differently. So Ugly Duckling is really an exploration of the self.
Yeah.
And so, I would encourage people to go back and rehear all of the things they were told as children that somehow shape who they are today and question it and see how it shapes you today and how it might have been a gift.
Because that largely ties into the internal monologue that we talked about earlier, in that's what controls the mind and the ego and the direction of the body at the end of the day. A lot of it really, really does stem from the childhood.
Yeah, that's right. It all does. It's funny because when you go see a psychologist, the first thing they do is they tell you to go do the deep dive about your childhood.
Yeah.
And it seems silly because they don't really know, most of the time, they don't really know actually how to unlock your potential and help you deal with your trauma. But they start there for a reason, because when you're born, you have a very limited set of software that comes online. And then, nurture starts to impact your software. And we develop all of these habits and these ingrained ways of thinking that define us, and we think they're unchangeable. But what you'll discover is they are changeable, and it takes a lot of introspection, but everyone can do it.
Mm. You referenced your blog a moment ago, and I love your blog and your personal website. The design is very unique and different. It's very, very
Thank
cool.
you.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical Squarespace or Wix landing page, right?
No, it's very, very unique by design.
You have a great piece on your blog about why you collect dice. Why do you collect dice?
Yeah, so during the pandemic, I came up with this. I run an experiment every day. Every day that I wake up, I say, today I'm going to experiment with something kind of wacky. And I run that experiment all day. And then if I get results, I repeat it. And then I just keep going. And I started thinking about decision paralysis. I started thinking about how much time we as human beings waste with trivial things. Like if you and I want to go see a movie tonight, we're going to spend 30 minutes or longer trying to figure out what genre, what we'd like to see. Maybe we'll get lucky and you'll be curious about a movie that I'm curious about, or we could just roll the dice and let the dice decide for us. And so I started dice rolling for things like restaurants to eat at, and then it got into, well, what happens if I choose what street to walk down? What happens if I choose what store to go shopping at? What happens if I use it to make all the decisions in my life that are non-financial? And so I started doing that. And so I carry dice on a necklace with me at all times. And if I start seeing people spending too much time making a really honestly non-consequential decision, I pull out the dice and I say, you know what, we're just going to let random decide.
Yeah.
And it's been so liberating. And the funny thing is, it has an unintended consequence. So my friends know I'm very serious. I never betray the dice. Whatever the dice land on, as long as it's not dangerous, it's not going to hurt me or others, I do it. And so sometimes I use it as a threat. So if people are like, I don't know what I want to do, and they hum and haw for too long, I'm like, you know what? Let's pull out and they're like, you know what? I want to do this. And then what happens is you discover what they truly, truly desire in their heart.
Yeah.
And so it's a forcing function of sorts that helps you really, really go where you really want to go. And so that's why I'm obsessed with them.
Do you believe the outcome of the dice roll is truly random? I think it was Einstein that said he partly believed that God was the one rolling the dice.
It depends on what you believe, but I suspect, I'm going to use the word suspect, that it is not random.
Okay, cool.
Based off of some of the magical things that happen that I have observed, and your mileage may vary, but I have observed just remarkable things that I couldn't have ever planned on
Yeah.
by doing this, by introducing randomness and non-mechanical behavior to my life.
I can't top that, so I will leave it there. But that's a
Okay.
great, yeah. For people that have enjoyed this, would your personal website with a very cool UX be the best place to go, or X, or where should they check you out?
Yeah, you can go to cyanbanister.com. I'm also pretty active on X every day. My handle there is scientist, and it's a joke because I study myself, and I call it the Church of Scientology. But yeah, you can come find me in any of those places. And my website is fashioned after my first computer that I ever had, and so it looks like a very retro old Mac experience. And so definitely go check it out. And every now and then I launch little Easter eggs on it, so maybe you can find some of them.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you click the follow or subscribe button wherever you're watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.
Introducing Lisa, the world's first AI-powered recruiter. She's an AI agent who works 24/7, screening candidates on autopilot, conducting interviews in 30 different languages, uploading all the best candidates to your applicant tracking system. Hire 10 times faster at 90% lower cost and significantly improve the candidate experience. Visit welovealpha.com to start your free trial now.